I'm Sherilyn Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 197 of the Brilliant Balance podcast, 5 signs of emotional maturity. That's what we're talking about today, emotional maturity. Thanks for joining me. So I wanted to ask you, as I was thinking about this episode, have you ever found yourself in a fight, like an argument, a disagreement with a toddler? Now, if you are a mom listening, that you're going to say, well, yes, I have, 1,000 times yes. But maybe, even if you are an aunt or a sibling and you can remember what it feels like to get into an argument with a toddler, what is that experience like? Right? In my experience, they are irrational, illogical, emotional, right? It's tantrum city. I am told that fights with teenagers can be similar, or sometimes even fights with adult friends or family members. And when I think about that image of you trying to hold a logic-based, mature argument or conversation, or you want to make a case to a toddler, they are simply going to stand there and stamp their foot and tell you no. Right? I'm not doing it. I'm not doing what you're saying. Doesn't matter what you say to me, right? They'll give you totally irrational, illogical arguments for why, if they give you one at all. But often you kind of are in this battle of wills of why won't you do that? And the answer is just because, or because I don't want to. And I think that's a pretty good metaphor for what I am referring to as emotional immaturity. Right? We would never argue that a toddler is emotionally mature. Of course they're not. They don't have any concept of how to manage their emotions. That's why we see meltdowns and tantrums over seemingly small things, right? Things that get the best of them. And I've really been thinking about this territory of emotional maturity and how important this area of growth is as we become adults and we maintain adult relationships. We all want to believe that we're mature, that we take the high road, that we don't get into these kinds of arguments or patterns. And I'm not only going to be talking about arguments or disagreements, right? I want to talk about how we essentially manage our emotions in a mature way today. And we all want to believe that we're great at it, but I want you to really sort of assess yourself today in terms of emotional maturity. I have these 5 things to share, 5 signs of emotional maturity, kind of hallmarks, if you will, of being emotionally mature. And I want you to think as we go through this about yourself. And the reason I'm emphasizing that is, boy, it is so easy to think about others and to point that finger at our spouse, our sister, our mom, one of our children, and say, oh, yeah, they're terrible at that. But I really want you to think about yourself and how you will build these traits, how you'll model these traits, how you'll pass them on through your example, right? So we might self-assess higher than those around us might grade us even. But I want you to think about yourself first and foremost. Here's a little side note. You won't be able to stop yourself from thinking about the people closest to you, because something I'll share in an example will probably spark for you like, man, that is just like my husband, or boy, do I see my teenager do that. And that you're not gonna be able to stop it. But I want you to really always bring the focus back to you. Where are you in terms of developing this skill? And how are you modeling it in your interactions with the people around you? Okay, because these abilities, these skills that I'm describing are transformational in 2 areas. They're transformational in relationships with other people, whether those are at home or whether those are at work. These skills are so powerful in work relationships. Our ability to maintain the respect of our coworkers, of our leadership, of the people who report to us. And they are also deeply important in our personal lives. And so it's really important, right, that we build these areas of emotional maturity for relationships. The second reason that I think it's so important is they help us feel better. If you feel victimized by your emotions, if you feel like you are the tail of the dog getting wagged around by your emotions, these skills are what put you back into feeling some sense of control over how you feel, right? Being able to steer and adjust how you feel using these skills. So let's get into them. I think there are 5 that I'm going to share today. The first one, the first sign of emotional maturity is that you know how to respond and not react. You know how to respond and not react. So what is the difference between the two? Well, this is where I always think about that absolutely fabulous quote. Every time I see it, it says author unknown. So if you know the author, feel free to let me know who it is. But here's the quote. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So if you think about the difference we're drawing here, a reaction is unconscious. It's automatic. It's reflexive. Okay, you get triggered, you have somebody attack you, something happens that makes you angry or hot, and you react without thinking. Responding is where we insert that beat to craft a response, right? It's not like it's not minutes and minutes, but just enough to be intentional and thoughtful about how we are going to respond. I am telling you, if we could teach the whole world this one skill, I think the crime rate would plummet. Just spend a little bit of time thinking about how many crimes are committed because there's no thought. Of course, there are some that are premeditated and planned, but how many acts of violence or crimes or arguments are rooted in a response or a reaction that there was no time to think and to actually create a response? Think about how many of your regrets, how many things you've said or done that you regret are rooted in reactions, not responses. So this skill is really important, knowing how to respond and not react. So how do you do it? Couple things that are really helpful, and they're really all rooted in thinking for just a beat, right? Kind of getting your thinking brain back online between something happening to you or around you and you taking action. So let's use the example of one of your children is screaming in your face, right? They are telling you they are not going to do it. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to listen. If you are going to react, you're probably going to react in anger. You're going to yell back, right? There's all kinds of things that are going to happen because your emotions take over and you react without thinking. If instead you can train yourself to take, let's just say 3 deep breaths, even 1 deep breath, right? In and out, you will have a different response. If you can train yourself to leave the room, get a little bit of distance between you and the other person or whatever the event is. Let's say one of the kids breaks a dish. If you can train yourself to take that beat, you're going to be back in the space of going, it's just the dish, we'll replace it. But if you don't take that beat, you'll have a reaction, okay? So the examples, you can go on and on with examples, but the emotionally mature end of this is to respond and not react when something happens in our environment, right? In none of these am I telling you this is easy, right? But it is the more mature, more evolved response to be able to think and craft an intentional statement, right? And honestly, sometimes they come to you pretty quickly. Just taking a deep breath when the dish breaks, maybe walking over to the sink and washing your hands before you even say anything is going to almost ensure that you have a more appropriate, more loving, kinder, more mature response. So that's the first sign. Okay, second sign I want to talk about is that you've developed the ability to not take things personally. You've developed the ability to not take things personally. So this is important because when we are emotionally immature, we think everything is about us, right? Every sideways glance, every change to tone of voice, every piece of body language, every unanswered text or email, we internalize as it's about us. We get feedback from someone or someone tells us something that they don't like and we internalize it as, oh, that's about us. What did I do? What did I do to upset them? They don't like me. They're mad at me. Okay. But here's the thing. It's not always about you. In fact, it's really never about you. Even if somebody is saying, I'm upset about this, I'm frustrated with you, I'm mad at you, I don't like how you did that, it's really about them and how they feel and how your actions or lack of actions jive with their expectations of you. Truly, truly, no one can make you feel anything. Feel happy, no one can make you feel happy or feel sad. But when their behavior is more aligned with your expectations, then you give them less of a hard time about it, right? And vice versa. So when we start getting into a pattern where we think everything is about us and we're taking it all personally, they don't like me, they're mad at me, they're frustrated with me, and we are, first of all, making ourselves like the center of their universe. And sometimes it has nothing to do with you. Sometimes the way that person in your life is behaving that day is about something that's going on at work or something that they're in their own head about. They're worrying about something or contemplating something or trying to solve a problem. And we're reading it as, oh, it's about us. I can remember when I worked for a big company, big global consumer products company, walking the halls in the corporate headquarters. And sometimes you would pass like a really senior leader, like a president or a really senior vice president. And when you saw one of those people as a more junior employee, early days, and they looked agitated or frustrated or angry, everybody thought, oh my gosh, they don't like my project. They're worried about the business. Something is going sideways. And often they just got a call from their spouse and something's going on with one of their kids, right? But we always are kind of looking through the lens of how does this affect me? So being able to depersonalize our interactions and not read into them so much is a sign of emotional maturity, right? Developing that ability to not take everything personally, to almost assume it's not about you. Because think about the freedom in your next interaction with that person if you're not worried that they're mad at you or frustrated with you or that they don't like you. So much freedom that comes from that opposite belief. Do you ever find yourself saying, I just need a minute to breathe? While the whole idea of meditation can sound totally intimidating, I've found that stepping away from the chaos of life, even just for a few minutes, is incredibly restorative. So if you're short on time, but could use a few moments of peace right about now, listen to my 5-minute meditation for working moms. It'll help you clear your head and come back to your day feeling centered and refreshed. Head over to brilliant-balance.com/breathe. Press play and settle in for a few mini moments of peace right now. Okay, here's the third one. Third sign of emotional maturity is when you're willing to have courageous conversations. When you're willing to have courageous conversations. So much conflict that causes us to be, petty or to be in conflict with other people for long periods of time are rooted in misunderstandings. They're rooted in our wires getting crossed, right? Things that never get discussed, and so they never get cleared up. And typically, that's because of avoidance, right? Typically, it's because something goes down in the interaction with this person in our life. Again, could be at work, could be at home. And we are so sure that we know what it meant that we complete the story in our own head and then we avoid them. We avoid the topic, we avoid the conversation because it's scary. Okay, could be with a colleague at work where we go on for months thinking we know exactly what happened and how they feel about us. And now we're reading into every interaction, but we're not talking to them about it because that would be scary, right? So avoidance then widens the distance between us and the other person instead of drawing us in closer and giving us the opportunity to talk it through, right? When we avoid, then things can fester. They can just sort of rot, right, in the relationship, or they can blow up, right? They can escalate to a point where that relationship is severed. But if instead we're willing to have courageous conversations, ones that are rooted in honesty, open communication, maybe a bit of vulnerability thrown in for good measure, then almost everything we want is on the other side. I say to the women in our coaching community all the time, almost everything you want is on the other side of a courageous conversation. You want a different relationship, you want something to be different with one of your children, you want a different way of interacting with your mom, you want something different in your work arrangement. Almost everything you want is on the other side of a courageous conversation with someone in your life. And so being willing to have those conversations, even when they're uncomfortable, even when they might have conflict in them, that is a sign of emotional maturity because we have confidence that we'll get to the other side of that conversation and be in a better place. And that's really what we all want, right? What we all want is to leverage the conversation to get ourselves to the other side of it and to be in a better place. When we're afraid, when we're emotionally immature and we avoid, we can't get to the other side. We're stuck, right? We're stuck in what is potentially a misunderstanding. It isn't even true. So that willingness to have those courageous conversations is a big deal. All right, what's next? The fourth principle here is the relationship between thoughts and feelings. Okay, this is a game changer. This is kind of the advanced class. I've talked about this a little bit here and there in the podcast before, but understanding the relationship between thoughts and feelings is a really big deal. So here's the basic pattern. Thoughts drive feelings, and those feelings can then drive more thoughts, okay? If you change your thoughts, you can change how you feel. And it happens almost instantly, okay? So what does changing your thoughts mean? First of all, you have to have this premise that all our thoughts are not true. The first time I heard that, I thought, that cannot be right. All our thoughts are not true. Well, sit with that for a minute. If you've never contemplated that sentence, hit pause on this podcast and think about the sentence. Are all of my thoughts true? I promise you the answer will be no if you think long enough about this, okay? So we don't think in facts. We don't think in truisms. We just have thoughts. Some of the thoughts we have no control over. They just pop into our head. Some of the thoughts we're very intentionally having, but all of our thoughts are not true. And some of our thoughts drive feelings that we do not like. So if we don't like how we're feeling, right? When you don't like a feeling that you're having, an emotion you're experiencing, a feeling that you're having, you want to ask yourself, what is the thought that's driving me to feel this way? And you want to really dance with that thought, okay? You can think of it as poking holes in the thought. You can think of it as dancing with it. You can think of it as, sometimes I imagine putting it inside of like a prism and turning it from all different directions, twist it 90 degrees, 45 degrees. You want to play with that thought so you can find some space inside of it. Typically, when our thoughts are driving negative feelings, there's a certainty that we've attached to that thought. Like we are believing that it is unequivocally true. And all of our feelings are coming out the other side of it. So let's go back to an example we probably all can relate to from our school days, which is I am going to fail that test. I'm going to fail that test. If we have the thought, I am going to fail this test, how are we going to feel? Not so good, right? I mean, really, there's nothing about that thought that's like positive. I am going to fail this test. But is that thought true? How would we know? We haven't taken the test yet. right? Or I finish the test and I say, all the girls are talking to each other, or all the kids are talking to each other. Oh, I totally failed that test. Oh, me too. I know I failed. I did so badly on that test. It was awful. Is that true? We haven't gotten the grade yet. We don't know. But that thought drives this kind of sickening feeling, right? Of fear or anxiety or sadness or anger or frustration. We're having all of these kind of negative emotions rooted in that thought. We could go on all day with this. I probably could do a whole episode, and maybe I will, on this relationship between thoughts and feelings. But the sign of emotional maturity is to understand that relationship. So when we have a feeling, we want to ask ourselves, what is the thought I'm having that's driving this feeling? It's that my husband's mad at me. It's that my daughter's going to fail this class. It's that, this neighbor is going to think XYZ about me. We're having a thought that is driving a feeling. And if we can go dance with that thought, rewrite it, twist it around, find space within it, it's like learning how to change the channel in your mind. And that changes everything. That gives you so much power back because you simply learn that, wow, if I want to feel differently, all I need to do is think a different thought, right? Again, I probably need to do a whole episode on this piece alone, because if you've looked at manifestation or you've looked at the power of positive thinking, it's all rooted in this. So much emotional freedom comes from being able to rewrite our thoughts, to choose thoughts that help us feel the way we want to feel. Okay, knowing the relationship between them, thoughts and feelings, and being able to sort of reverse engineer, I don't like the feeling I'm having. What's the thought that's driving it? How can I dance with that thought to get a better feeling? Big deal. We talk about this all the time in coaching. And the fifth sign of emotional maturity, as a little bit of a turn here, is that when your resilience reserves are low and you know how to rebuild them. Okay, so what is a resilience reserve? I kind of made that term up. Your resilience reserves are like your ability to tolerate something that is stressful or distressing or demanding. Okay, so when you realize that your life is kind of piling up on you and you're dealing with maybe some challenges, you're dealing with setbacks, you're dealing with something complicated happening in your life, you have to be good. If you're emotionally mature, you're going to be good at knowing, I don't have a lot in the tank right now, right? My resilience reserves have been taxed, and so I'm going to need to rebuild them if I want to be my best self. So think about things like, have you been getting less sleep? Have you been under a lot of stress? Have you been in a really demanding chapter of life where things are happening around you or to you that you are trying to figure out, like, well, how am I going to deal with these, this very stressful period or this demanding period in my life? Maybe you just haven't been taking great care of yourself, and that not taking great care of yourself is what is driving your resilience reserves downward. Okay. So when you realize, like, my tank is kind of empty, these are some signs of it. Some signs of it would be like, I'm a little edgy, I'm quick-tempered. Maybe I'm crying at the drop of a hat, right? Maybe I'm foggy, like my brain feels foggy. Maybe I'm taking everything personally again. You could go back through this list I shared today, and it's like, if you're going backwards on that list, that may be a sign that your resilience reserves are low. So how do you rebuild them? We're all a little bit different in this, but the key thing is to know that you have to give yourself a little bit of extra cushion. It's like you're going to be a little bit raw. You're going to be a little bit extra sensitive, or a lot extra sensitive, if your reserves are low. So you want to kind of wrap yourself in bubble wrap, right? You want to put a little bit of extra cushion between you and things that could bother you until you can rebuild your reserves. And then you want to be really intentional about how you do that. A good principle to think about here is equal and opposite. If the demands on you have been really high, then you're going to need a lot of rebuilding. If the demands have been kind of moderate, like you had a bad night or you had a bad weekend, then you need less to kind of get rebuilt. Things that often work. Rest, very important, right? Sleep, rest. Laughter, any opportunity to laugh is so restorative. It just lightens the whole mood of things. Meditation can be very powerful to rebuild your reserves. Exercise, especially intense exercise, can be really powerful. Some time off from whatever is demanding, right? I talked about that in a previous episode, just letting yourself come up for air, getting some time alone. So you're going to have your own personal formula that you develop through trial and error. But emotionally mature people know, look, my reserves are low. And I know I'm going to have to go intentionally rebuild them so that I can remain emotionally mature, right? We don't ask of ourselves that we can operate at that level when we're empty, when we're running on empty. So I want you to think again about yourself, just yourself in these 5 areas I shared today, and ask yourself, do I know how to respond and not react? How consistently do I do that? Have I developed the ability to not take things personally? Am I willing to have courageous conversations? Do I know the relationship between my thoughts and my feelings? Do I know how my thoughts drive my feelings? And do I know when my resilience reserves are low, and do I know how to rebuild them? And think about yourself, about if you are not loving your score, right, in any one of those areas. How will you build that ability? How will you model that trait, right? How do you set an example for your children or the other people at work? How do you elevate the conversation in your relationships? We all want to be emotionally mature, right? I don't think there's anybody who says, oh, I don't want to build these at all. I want to remain emotionally immature and uncomfortable and volatile for the rest of my life. We all want these skills. And they're not natural. They're not inherent. These are things that come with practice, with focus, with commitment, with the willingness to get it wrong sometimes while we're trying to get it right. And so I want to invite you on that journey to really think about, how can you build these capabilities? If you don't already have them, how can you build these capabilities? I think that's a really valuable skill for all of us to spend some time thinking about, this collection of skills that I shared today. And if you want some help with that, I will tell you, these are the characteristics I regularly see women build inside of our coaching programs. Behind the podcast at Brilliant Balance, we have a whole host of women who we are coaching through a variety of pathways, whether they're working on productivity or career transformation, or getting a plan together for how they want to shape the next chapter of their life overall, or working on their health and well-being through energy management. So these skills are something that we teach inside of our coaching programs. And if that's something that you want to explore and learn more about, the easiest thing to do is just have a short conversation with me or someone on my team. You can do that. We'll link it up in the show notes. You can also go to our website at brilliant-balance.com, and there's a link there to schedule a conversation. It is really valuable if you want to start changing your life along these lines. So that is all I have for you today. We're going to be back again next week with a brand new episode. And if you are not already in our Facebook community, it's the Brilliant Balance Facebook group, come on over and join us. We have a really thriving community over there. Lots of great stuff that we share, free workshops that we do regularly and promote inside that Facebook group. So if you're not already in the group, come join us. And until next time, my friends, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.